Everybody for tuning in once again to Coda Conversations. Today we have Deborah Chambers, cloud engineer, broadcast engineer at Fox. Welcome to the show.
Hey, welcome everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely a pleasure to have you aboard. Usually to get things started off, we like to get into our guest background a little bit. So do you mind telling us your background in tech and how you ended up in your current position?
Oh wow. I kind of started college early. I finished my high school stuff early and I started it when I was like around 16. So, I originally wanted to be a web designer. That was my main. So like I started out with CSS and HTML and all that good stuff and then Uh, I couldn't really get into that industry, and I don't know. I was just kind of feeling my way. I feel like, I mean, not everybody does that, but like, it's a big thing when you're still a teenager,
Mhm.
and you get kind of thrust into like the career mindset early. You kind of goof around a little bit. So,
Right, right.
yeah. So I guess that's the downside, but I eventually decided that I liked the way programming worked. I kind of like it's like there's almost a philosophical point to it at points, logic, you know what I'm saying? So I started, learning like, especially through my college courses like Java and Python and getting involved in some other programming languages. And then was like, okay, maybe I want to do something that's more programming oriented. So I started working towards that goal. So that's when I, was getting involved in like robotics and stuff like that as I got older, and then I was like, well, I need some experience doing like something more tech. So I made the really foolish decision of I was like, so, I like to stay up at night, so I can do night shift. I'll be okay. I mean, I
Yeah.
survived for 2 months, but I was like, I was learning like SQL like in 1 week just to like get out of it. So I
Wow.
could move on to like a different position because I was like, I
Wow.
have to escape. I'm not going to survive.
Yeah, crazy.
So, yeah, I mean, it's for somebody, and some people can handle it. It's just for me, I tend to think a lot, so I'll just be awake thinking and not sleeping.
Right.
So, yeah, and then so that's when I got into, as I was doing application specialist tier two work. I was working with databases, um, and just basically more or less, querying for that information about customers and whatnot, and troubleshooting and such. And I still was like, okay, I think I want to do something a little more. And so eventually, when I was reached out to by a recruiter um, for the Fox position, on LinkedIn, actually. I didn't believe it at first because I was someone from Fox, like, I okay, and then but then when I went there and I went through the interview, they hired me on as a contractor, and then I eventually got hired on like full time.
Oh,
And
nice.
so yeah, but I saw that I enjoyed like how it was more like a, I mean, the system is so complex that you're forever learning something. You're never going to get bored. I mean, I mean, I think that there should be some simplicity within the complexity, but for what it's worth, I do enjoy having to constantly learn. Yeah.
Yeah, so now were you working in Java at this role or no?
So kind of like there are projects that sometimes we work on for like different um, just like specific things that we need. And so, like, sometimes it'll be, database related. There needs to be automation. So usually I've used mostly Python for those roles. Uh,
Python. Okay.
yeah, and obviously the associated JSON, what I mean, just because you're dealing with like API and stuff like that. So
Okay.
yeah.
So, like, did they have an intense like onboarding, or was it pretty much you need to hit the ground running?
Um, so it wasn't intense onboarding, but I think it's more like when you're in the contractor role, they kind of get a feel for what you're good at.
Right.
Right. So they're basically like trial and error, like seeing who's capable of what. And I mean, I can see how that has its downside sometimes, but that's just their method. And I think it works, especially when you're dealing with introverted people or people that might not be doing the best in interviews. Like they might just blank, but they might be
Right.
brilliant. You know what I'm saying? So,
Right. Right.
I mean, that's just kind of their method. So, and then for different roles, obviously they're probably going to be interviewing differently. So I can't say for, a different team, exactly how they interview, but yeah, that's how they interview.
So, when you came on, did you interview specifically to be like a broadcast slash cloud engineer, or was it more of just like a general tech interview and they kind of placed you after the fact?
It was specifically for, well, it was because they know like what they have is so specific that like, somebody who's got a tech background is probably not going to know all of those things. Like, they might not know what a PTP Grandmaster clock is. Like, you're not going to know that stuff. Like, you might know something about Python. You might know that C runs faster than Python, but you're not going to know the other stuff. So they kind of understand that. And so it's more of like a generalized tech interview at first. And then over time, they do assess your knowledge and kind of like basically see where you're at. But yeah.
Interesting. So, on the interview, how important do you feel like the soft skills are, like just being able to communicate what you're doing? Because I know on tech interviews, I had the one tip I got was just talking through what I was thinking and just always
Hmm.
being communicative versus just trying to solve the problem.
Right.
Well, I seem very friendly and engaging right now, but I'm a very introverted person. So, yes, it's taken.
As are we. As are we.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like, actually, when I first started out at Fox, I was a lot more shy. Like, I tend to be one of those people that has a hard time looking people in the eyes sometimes. So, yeah. So, I would say, as far as like people skills go, my people skills have actually progressed since I've been working at Fox, as opposed to when I first started out. But I think I was good enough that, as far as like people skills go and soft skills, that it was acceptable. Yeah.
Great.
So, y'all know, when you first get on the job, especially with the engineer mindset, being an
Yeah.
introvert, you could just kind of drift into that zone where, okay, I just want to solve the problem, be isolated, and be done with it.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's one of the big things they were emphasizing to me at different points were like if you ever have questions, be sure to ask because
Mhm.
my tendency is like I want to figure this out myself and just be like you said isolated. But
Right.
um
Right.
yeah, so
Yeah, I found just being more communicative and talking to my teammates, talking to higher ups, that actually helped me progress a lot quicker because
yeah.
people are hiring people, people are promoting people. So,
Yeah, it's
you might
people.
be exactly. So if you're
Yeah,
like you're this genius and you're not communicating with anybody, then
right.
they're not going to know what you're doing.
Right. And then sometimes things can be misinterpreted if you're, like, well, what were you doing during that time? Like, you didn't communicate. Stuff like that. So that's why it's always good to communicate. And I feel like they kind of understood my natural personality and worked with me, and it's been great. So yeah.
Awesome.
So like what did they do to accommodate because you're more introverted? Like were they just like really patient and kind of like, slowly opening you up or
Yeah, I think so. Definitely I tend to write a lot, so um, as long as I'm like, whenever I'm completing something and like, let's say, there's an assessment, so they're doing like a stand-up presentation in front of everybody, like how about you write an article, stuff like that. Um, Although I have done a stand-up presentation, that one I did a lot of PowerPoint uh,
Oh, nice.
slides to like help me sort of like go from one topic to the other. But
Yeah, I can see
yeah,
that.
but like definitely I was definitely eased into it. So I appreciate that because some people don't understand at all. They're like, yeah, how come you're not like everybody else? Like, you should
What
be.
is the funnest part of your job, would you say?
What? Well, okay. I like the teammates I work with. There's definitely a good team environment, and that's one of the
That's
one of the biggest.
huge.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
huge.
team is huge.
hmm So, it kind of brings out the best in you when you have a good team. You can make jokes and stupid puns, and people actually laugh. Just kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a big thing. But also, I think you know, for me, the biggest thing I like about Fox is the ability to innovate. So I've had an opportunity to get my ideas out there and actually help build projects and architect projects because they're big on like listening to people and listening to their ideas as opposed to be like, well, that's stupid. We have this had the same infrastructure since forever, so why should it change now?
Right.
Um, and there are downsides too to innovation. I tend to love innovation. I want new things, but if you don't have things planned out as efficiently, you could. I mean, recently, I don't know if you guys have read about Fox's venue. There was a whole thing with that. So they tried something new. They tried their own little mini startup, but it didn't quite
Mm.
pan out the way they wanted to.
Oh,
So there are projects like that you could help with basically whether they pan out or not, but sometimes it's worth the risk, because as long as you've taken all the risks into you're accommodating for them and you're balancing it out in your mind, like the pros and cons, and thinking about that. So,
mhm.
yeah.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
like, for your role, are you like dealing with cloud? We don't always have like the most technically inclined
Yeah.
audience. Some people are
Yeah.
non-technical. So,
Uh-huh.
are you dealing with like technologies like AWS and streaming, and like what technologies are you dealing with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So, sorry, I have a little paper written for myself. So basically, what I'm going to say about the technology is something that you could find on the internet if you wanted to double check what I said, or you kind of wanted to know, because maybe you're more of a reader than a listener.
Mhm.
Right.
But yeah, and then also just for, I guess, just keeping in line with what I can say.
Mhm.
But Fox Tech Center is like where I work is it's like the brain center that keeps all the Fox content coming to the TVs and digital screens 24/7. And so what happens is the signal goes into the building, and so the kind of signal flow we have is uh, it's a IP based architecture. And so there'll be station playout instances that receive input from a combination of networking programming from networks. And the media is like, so the digital content is actually stored in AWS cloud services. So that's where we work with AWS. Now, there is a specific cloud team. We work with cloud, but it's not like, I mean, technically it's all the time, but it's not like we're not always building the cloud architecture. Now we may have a project that we become a part of. So it's very, the role is very flowy. Like you might end up doing a different kind of thing as well.
Like they'll put you over here and then they'll move you over here, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But you're still generally a broadcast engineer. So anyways, sorry,
Okay.
back to the signal flow. So it comes into the building.
Yeah.
We get it, and so the kind of it's IP based, and so the signal is it's not, when we get it, it's basically divided. So like it's going to be divided into like the video, the audio, and whatever else, like graphics. They're all separate.
Sure.
And so yeah, and so then it's going to go through that, and and a lot of these different things are on AWS. And then it has to pass through the encoders, and then basically it is multiplexed, or like basically all those signals are like put together and then dispersed. So then they're muxed. I know that sounds, I guess you could think of it as mixed, but
that's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like you're dealing with some pretty lower level protocols to make this happen.
So in my specific role, I mean, I guess it depends like on the situation, but we also have a distribution engineering team. And so they're the ones that we hand off the refined pieces to them, and they, deal with the rest before it gets muxed. And then it gets dispersed. So, yeah.
So for those who might not be aware, what is muxed?
Yeah, so muxed is it's also called multiplexing. So it's when you take those streams, like imagine this is a video, this is like, audio, and this is going to be like a graphic or something, and then muxed is where those three, like think of it like a rope. It's like these three cords are being intertwined, so it could be sent out as one signal. Instead of, when you get the signal on your screen, you're not getting three different signals. You're getting one signal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
right.
but we have to refine each one, because let's say we want audio to be specifically like maybe it's too sharp in a certain area, and we want to kind of soften it, or reverse. We want to make something louder and it's supposed to be quieter. I mean, we want to make it louder and it was quieter. So stuff like
Right.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that was definitely interesting.
Yeah.
So like initially you spoke about wanting to get into like web design, but this role seems more like really technical, more like left brain logical things. So is this like an area you want to stay in, or?
So that's one thing I wanted to address. A lot of people think that, you can't be both creative and logical. Like it's impossible to be
Right.
two things.
Right.
If you're a creative person, if you can do art, or if you're a musician, there's no way you can also be a mathematician. All of those things are false. I am both creative and logical. I am very creative actually, but I also enjoy logic and strategy and building things. So I feel like that that kind of takes people who would be very good in a certain position, like, oh well, and they have to almost pretend to be like Spock, but they might be both things. And
Right.
yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like I don't think that that's correct, to think that you could either be left brain or right brain. Especially if you tend to be someone who's non-neurotypical, you're probably going to have a different perspective and mindset. So, yeah.
Yeah, like for me, I'm on the autism spectrum, so I
Right.
think things are different for me versus someone who doesn't have autism.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure that as neuroscientists will progress, they'll realize that it's not cut and dry left and right. Um, there's been situations where the brain has taken on a different role on the other side when one side was down, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm,
So I just think it's yeah, and then sometimes people's the way their synapses are kind of like intertwined. They might be just might be they might be wired differently. So yeah,
yeah,
Right.
it's pretty
yeah,
interesting because, like, initially, I started off as an artist, wanting to be an artist, and then I went to accounting and finally ended up in software. So, yeah, you could definitely be on both sides of the spectrum,
yeah,
but I feel like I'm, like, logical dominant and I'm creative as a subsector of that versus
yeah,
creative first and then logical.
yeah. So I mean, for sure, like there might be something you might do more of, but um, I think that's the important thing when it comes to having a system, like say a team of people. They're all going to have different perspectives, but um, if everyone thinks like you, then you're probably not going to have other ideas from like other voices from a different perspective on like a system, and then you might miss something um, either in the bigger picture or in the smaller picture. So
Yeah, I think perspective is huge. It really
right,
is. Yeah, it really
and it
is.
just gives a bigger overall perspective when you have multiple opinions.
Right.
Yeah,
So I know a lot of corporations, they can foster the environment where there's a uniformity of opinion. Most people are in
yeah,
agreement. So how do you create an environment where people feel comfortable sharing divergent opinions so that you're getting all perspectives?
yeah, exactly. So one thing to do is sometimes I know a lot of companies do things like they try to have like reviews, like how did we do? Did we sometimes just talking to those people like one on one, personal. Like, what do you think about this? Although sometimes I think people can feel a little scared, like I don't want to talk to my boss about that. But you know,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, but like putting them on a like kind of like assessing what they're good at and putting them on different projects is a great way to kind of assess their abilities as well, and see their
Absolutely.
unique perspectives. So, and I have seen that kind of situation play out, at least in this particular role. And I've learned that different perspectives, like there might be people who are more detail oriented and they're really good at seeing, catching the finite details in a specific area. And they will be working on a specific project and they're good at that. So, yeah, different ideas.
Yeah, that's really important is being able to assess what your other teammates are good at and kind of stepping out of the way. Sometimes,
Right.
especially when uh maybe like you're the A student, you want to take over the project and do everything, but
Yeah.
you're if you're not relying on your team, you're severely limiting the performance.
Yeah. So it's always a good sign of a good manager when they're able to more or less kind of work with people's personalities and different
Right.
weaknesses. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
So, like, when you enter a new project, what are some of the things you do to ensure that you're going to be successful? Like, are you carefully gathering requirements, assessing your teammates? What do you do?
So I guess it depends on the project.
Hmm.
So if it's a project where I'm supposed to make something new, then well, my first inclination, to be honest, is to come up with new ideas.
Yeah.
That's just, but like also at the same time, you're right. There are certain protocols or whatever that we have to follow. So I have to kind of, weigh everything, the risks, like the pros, the cons, like what I can and can't do. Even even though I'm super creative and I really want to do this particular idea, I still have to, kind of work in line with what we have. So
You have to consider everything.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when you're kind of on the fence about, say, introducing a new technology, looks kind of risky. What's the tiebreaker for you? How do you say, okay, let's go ahead and bring this in?
So a lot of times, it's not all reliant on one person. You know, it's like if I'm working with somebody, we'll go over the basically like, is this going to, in the long run, cost a lot, or is this going to, in the long run, be more beneficial? And also, you have to think about everything else. Like sometimes when you're using different technologies, is this something that we can continue to use, and it's there's not going to be so many requirements, like from a different company, or whatnot. So like you're not going to continually have to ask permission to use certain things, or like
Yeah.
yeah.
So it seems like you have a potentially high pressure job, especially dealing with broadcasting. So like what are some of the safeguards y'all have? You can't obviously go into super detail, but how do you keep things going, just make sure there's no major disaster.
Well, first of all, coffee. If you're not a coffee drinker,
Yeah.
have some kind of beverage. Make sure you eat breakfast.
Yeah.
That's all. It's just a beginning spot. Um,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
unfortunately, I had a time when I drank a little too much coffee every day and never went to sleep, but I kind of cut back on that. But so there's a balance.
Yeah, for sure.
But otherwise, another thing is that a lot of times you have to constantly. It reminds me of like a little bit like a starship, right? So let's say you're on a spaceship, and then like you have to make sure that the engine is running. Like if the engine fails, you're all doomed. So in a way, it kind of feels like that sometimes, where it's like you can't have an outage on air. Like that's not something that can happen. Like you can't have a blue, whatever. So like there's so like the infrastructure is so large that like different things work on different servers. So like I, you kind of have to have like almost like it's like a language. You have to like, I feel like you have to kind of learn the language. It's like I kind of know that this is in this particular like part of the architecture. I know what server this is on and like what IP address is associated with it, et cetera, et cetera. It's and honestly, like it's going to be hard to remember everything. So, as long as you have your sources with you, and you're able to cross reference that, and you're able to be quick enough to know those kinds of things at a moment's notice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. That's definitely important.
Right. Especially someone runs in and asks a request for something, because we work, we don't always implement infrastructure. Sometimes there's just a period when we're just managing things. It's because we manage the signal flow. So someone who's an operator might be might have a specific thing go down on them or whatever, and you have to be ready and kind of know, what am I supposed to be doing in this particular situation. And sometimes it's a little stressful if you don't exactly know, but you have to sort of have an idea like of what's happening, and be able to double check that. And if you don't know, that's why there's a team there. You're kind of all working together. And sometimes, not everybody's going to be there because this is broadcast, and so it's 24/7. So it might just be two engineers there, and one engineer is called this way, the other engineer is called this way. But there's always constant communication. If you're not certain of something, then there's a chat, you can ask in the chat. and also make sure you have good notes and good resources. Yeah.
Awesome. So, like, when you're working on a really complicated project with a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different parts, how do you go about breaking things down to make it comprehensible? For example, like when I'm working on a brand new code base, I like to kind of break, isolate each component and see what it does in isolation.
Well, my way of like breaking things down is I have to like sit and think about it, write it out or talk about it with somebody, and like really like
Sure.
assess the situation. But I mean, of course, somebody that is in the project with me, not just any other person. But
Right.
yeah, right. And so um, kind of like break it down strategically and more or less analytically. Um, like
Okay.
yeah, that's my idea. Is like when I really when I'm faced with a tough situation, I definitely uh, the first instinct is to see the patterns and then break it down analytically from there. Um, and then if I am supposed to bring in my ideas, I definitely bring in my ideas. Yeah.
Now, how much would you say that your ideas or new ideas that you have are welcome on the project?
So uh well, it depends on the situation, right? So like if it's a project where I'm supposed to be coming up with new ideas, or if I talk to my manager and say I have this idea about this, then they'll listen. But let's say I'm just doing day-to-day kind of stuff and I'm supposed to be troubleshooting, like I'm not going to be putting a brand new infrastructure in place. And at that moment, it's already there and it's my job to troubleshoot what's there,
Right.
not just come up with something completely brand new. Now let's say I wanted to do something silly like build a program, like a Python program to parse an Excel sheet just because of course I can do that. That's a new thing, but it's, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, how important would you say is it to keep abreast of the latest technological trends, just so you have like maybe more ideas of how to create new architectures, new modern relevant architectures?
Um, so there are fairs and stuff like the NAB that you can go to, and you can, there's a very close communication that broadcast engineers have with their manager because they are supposed to be kind of that multitasking where they can troubleshoot on a day-to-day basis the infrastructure that at that moment is not changing. Um, but also, it's okay that they recommend ideas like, hey, I saw this one thing. I wonder if that's going to be cheaper in the long run. And
Right.
fine. Or I saw this one, sort of technology that's going to work better for, um, whatever. And it's so I'm thinking of several different things. I'm like, yeah, that totally needs to be redone. But
Right. Right. Right.
all the complaints, but uh,
Mhm.
uh, but yeah, and sometimes you have to work with what you have. Like, if you have different partners, there are technology partners that we have partnerships, and at this moment we have to deal with them. So um, there's that. So it's kind of like a little bit of like you're fish swimming, and you have to find your way in the water. Certain ways you go, and certain ways you kind of just get a feel for, and you don't go.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like you're doing highly technical work. Do you prefer what you're doing now over web design, or what does that look like for you?
Well, I kind of gave up on the web design idea a while ago, but I didn't give up on art itself. Like
Okay.
personally, I do a lot of artwork. I even have one of my paintings here if you want me to show you.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I made this.
Oh,
Oh, awesome.
wow.
Yeah, it's a bird.
That's
Was that
beautiful.
acrylics?
Yeah. Um, uh, all right. So like no, I didn't stop being a creative person or artistic. I just do it on my personal time and
Yeah.
yeah. So um I think that like people are so unique and their personalities are pretty flowy. I mean, of course, you're going to keep the personality you have. You're not going to randomly change personality, but there's so many intricate pieces. You can't put people in a box and say they're going to be only this way or a different
Hmm.
Right. Sure.
way.
Yes, really important to have a life outside of work. Like when I first got in
Yeah.
the industry, I was going crazy, just like studying nonstop. But as I got further in, I started getting burnt out. So I just had to do something other than coding.
Right, exactly. If you if you spend your whole life focused on work, you will become like your work. And is that what you want to be? You want to
Yeah.
be a carbon copy of everybody else.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't work, though, because I mean, we all have to, live and eat and drink and have a home. And you should do something that you enjoy. Not everybody gets that opportunity to do something they enjoy, though.
I think
Um,
it's pretty rare, because
yeah,
most people I talk to on, a day-to-day basis, they don't really enjoy their job, or they don't really have passion for what they're doing for money. So, it's interesting that you say that.
yeah. So, definitely, um, sometimes it's hard because you have to work extremely. It's kind of like the situation I was explaining to you. Like, I couldn't do the help desk position anymore. Like, I had to, even if it was like, spend a little more time, just that whole week focusing on learning SQL. Like, I would take that time to do it because I wanted to move to a different place. Now,
Sure.
sometimes you're burnt out and sometimes it's going to be extremely hard to just learn something on the fly. So there will be moments when you are able to do that and when you can't. But when you are able to do that, like take the time to do it. And if you have to make that move and be as strategic as possible, more or less. But don't give up on your dream.
Yeah, that sounds really important.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points to be made from that. One is don't be afraid to pivot when you need to,
Exactly.
because I hated accounting, pivoted to software, and now I'm thriving. And also, I think another good point is yeah, to avoid burnout. Like your life isn't work. Like work is a part of your
Exactly.
life, so you don't want to give up your
Yes.
passions. So art seems like it's one of your passions. Like to paint? Did you teach yourself, or did you like go to school for that?
It's a gift. I've always been good at art, but I'm it's not the only thing I'm good at. I'm kind of multi-talented, so I also play the piano. I like to make music. I just tend to have a lot of hobbies. So
Mhm.
uh, I am I yeah, I'm kind of super creative.
Now, what kind of stuff do you compose? I'm a musician myself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I make video game music, and then I'm kind of like a jazz fusion drummer.
yeah. Sometimes I do EDM music, or
Okay,
techno music, and then sometimes I just sit at my piano and just compose music, whatever comes to my mind.
that's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I used to really be into art, but I stopped because, like, psychologically, I would always look at my art and start bashing it in my mind, like, "Oh, it could be better. It can be better. It can be better." It stopped being fun.
Right.
Just ended up quitting, but I was actually pretty good.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I would encourage anybody who's watching this to not give up on your hobbies. And there's something interesting about a lot of people are like, well, what's the point now? AI can just build the same thing that I'm making, and make it look even better. But
Yeah.
you're actually a well-rounded person when you have some kind of um, outlet or a creative side, than just simply. Uh, I mean, even if your creative side is to play Sudoku puzzles,
Right.
it just some kind of outlet. Um, and I've noticed it's almost like it reminds me of cross training.
Mm.
So like, let's say you want to be good in fencing, so you play a different, like, I don't know, foosball, and then you realize that I actually do better at fencing when I'm also playing foosball. And or let's say you do weight training and you realize that you're actually, when you do weight training, you find out that you're good at something else as well, so there's that cross training. So in a way, when you're doing those kinds of things, you're thinking abstractly, you're kind of doing a cross training. You're training your mind. Sometimes your mind needs a break, and our minds are not necessarily muscles. They don't. You don't want to overwork yourself, and so, but yeah, you still need to work. So, kind of a way to simulate that rest is by taking 30 minutes or whatever to do something else, something that you find enjoyable, something that you find is kind of takes your mind off of work.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's huge. That's huge. I mean, for me, I practice drums 2 hours every day, usually
yeah,
from about 3 to 5 o'clock
yeah,
East Coast time. I'm in New York. And it's just one of those things I'm able to get out of my head and into my
exactly,
body. I'm
exactly.
able to, like you said, you play piano, so
Yeah.
you're able to get out of your head into your body, into
Mm-hmm.
feeling. I mean, primarily, I'm a drum teacher too. I teach feel and groove. So I'm not someone that's going to sit there with a book and say, okay, play me this line. And that, I mean,
Yeah,
that's great if you can do that, but you got to look back at musicians like Buddy Rich, the jazz swing drummer. He didn't read any music. So
yeah,
he'd have a guy that will go sit in, play the set with the band. Then Buddy Rich would step in and play the whole thing note for note just from his memory.
yeah,
So, there's multiple ways to thrive. There's multiple ways to attack
exactly.
different problems, which I think is what you've kind of been getting at here.
Yeah, that's exactly, you said it probably better than I did.
Yeah, I think it's also important not to feel guilty about exploring your hobbies because a couple of things that I had to do, I had to get over the hyper competitive nature and feel like
Yeah,
I need to be better than everybody else. One and two, American society kind of teaches you that it's all about making money and you know,
exactly. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, because like you said, there are advertisements everywhere. The biggest, well, I mean, I have no choice but to see advertisements every day, but um, especially on the screen. But you have to realize that you yourself are not a commodity. So your soul is not something that could be sold. So when you are creating something, sometimes it's okay to create something just for the sake of creating something, not something that always needs to be sold. Sometimes there are inventions that are made that in the moment it looks kind of dumb and it has no reason for it, but something new comes out and it was actually like the basically something that was like the key to unlock the other invention. So uh, things can work together. Now, I mean, sometimes there is a wasting of time that does happen, I'm sure, but there's no need for anybody to beat themselves up over stuff. As sometimes you just gotta, you know, explore.
Yeah, sometimes situations just are what they are, and we have
Yeah,
to take it at face value.
yeah. Nobody's gonna come into something and be perfect immediately. I am not perfect. Um, when I first started out in piano, it sounded really bad. But over time, I started to get the feel of it and get more and more intuitive with it. So, uh, and nobody starts out perfectly.
Yeah. Do you write your own music? Do you compose?
Well, that's the funny thing is, I so I can create music. I can hear it and play it, but I haven't gotten to the point of like efficiently reading and writing the notes. Now
Okay.
I can record it and it sounds good and everybody likes it, but I have to more or less memorize the whole song and go back and replay it. Um, so
Interesting.
I don't know. It's just yeah. So the way I get around that is by I mean I know there is now AI software that helps you when it comes to composing music. It can listen to the song you made and write the notes down. So,
Wow. That's
yeah,
incredible.
So yeah, I recently made a post on LinkedIn. It's pretty much in alignment with what you said. In order to make good music, you're gonna have to make a lot of bad music. There's gonna be a time when you
yeah,
first pick up an instrument, it's gonna sound terrible. You just
yeah,
have to
Terrible.
yeah,
Yeah.
stick with it until you gradually get good.
yeah.
And I think that's with anything.
Yep. Um, and I think there are a lot of people who wanted to get into tech, but they're like, especially when it comes to programming, because I think programming is one of those things where it's you can miss one detail and the whole program does not work.
Yeah, it's like with Java. You have one semicolon in the wrong place,
Yeah.
and
Well,
it won't.
JavaScript is the worst, and then there's Java, which is different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, no, Java is kind of like a big boy language. It's a
hmm
beast. It's a beast.
oh, for sure. Um, a lot of people prefer Python because it's a lot easier, but um, yeah, Java's a little bit more complex in its language.
You
Um,
can write things quicker in Python, right?
yes. Hmm.
With less words or less
Yeah, less
characters.
verbose. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I think my thing with Python or the
Doesn't
I
run.
prefer types because like when in bigger projects you get to immediately understand what this variable is versus like
Yeah.
having to guess at it or
It's okay for like I was saying about certain like simple, you know, programming robotics things. It's fine for like automation, especially when you're working with like API calls or whatever. But if you want to build something like software engineering, you're probably going to want to use a different language because they just compile faster.
Absolutely. So, to kind of get on this last topic here, we spoke a little bit about AI, and we also talked about art. I feel like art is like one of the last bastions of humanity. AI it can copy art, but it's not original. And a lot of times, you can look at the AI generated art and tell it's AI. It's like something there that's a little off, and I feel like that's why it's important for humans to still create art.
Yeah, I think that AI has a hard time understanding the bigger picture and also the details. But sometimes when I look at AI art, I feel like the light scattering is off. And in the same way, so like it doesn't seem to understand like how light should scatter in a photo. And like even in the overall picture, so you might see a shadow is actually off, whatever, even if the rest of the picture looks absolutely fine. Um, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting to note that in that same way, it doesn't seem to like in the way light scatters across the whole photo. It's almost going to be more like an equation, right? So it's going to be like things should be kind of equal in certain circumstances. Like all the light is coming from a certain location. It shouldn't be like facing a different direction. So I feel like it doesn't look at that bigger picture and see the overall like equation of different
Mhm.
things,
Right.
different details. It doesn't. The problem is it doesn't understand, and so that's like having that understanding is something humans can have.
Mm.
Um, Maybe someday AI will kind of have some ability to understand, but
Yeah, I
um,
mean, how far off do you think we are from, I guess they call it AGI, artificial general intelligence?
I've thought about that a lot, and I think that AI could have, like, I've noticed Claude AI has better recall. Like, it's like able to think about what you said in the past and think about it again. But basically, I think that we're not super far off, but it still won't be exactly human.
Right.
Yeah, like
You mean just from like a comprehension point of view?
yeah, so there are definitely going to be points where it's going to be super good and it's going to be like, wow, why didn't I think of that? And then other points where it's going to be like, how did you come to that conclusion? Like, you're so off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, can AI really infuse meaning into art as well? You know, it can make a pretty looking picture, but what does this
Right.
picture mean? And I think that's the important part of art.
Yeah.
So, like, are you optimistic about AI, or do you view it as something that we really need to pump the brakes on and be very careful about how we approach it?
AI is a tool. It's not human. Um, at least not yet. I have no doubts that when we go quantum, then it will get more of that understanding that I'm talking about. We're not there yet, but we're getting very close to that. I think that's when AI will get a form of a soul, but not really, still not be there entirely.
Right.
Um, I just, I would never want, I mean, I have to laugh because it's like with the kind of um, architecture we have, like it's, the way things are built and they're not built to last really. Um, Things in technology tend to break down over time. There's like a sort of tech entropy. Um,
Yeah. Right.
yeah, so I wouldn't like, I don't think that it can withstand that tech entropy right now. But once it goes quantum, then it'll be able to have more of that recursion, and be able to refer to things and then also think outside of that
Interesting.
sort of 2D space. You know?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
So, like, since AI right now, it's pretty much a tool. We can put it on the task and have it operating 24/7. But as it gains something that resembles sentience, if it doesn't want to do this particular task, does it have the right to not do it anymore?
so our brains are like more or less like a AI quantum computer, kind of. I mean, in a very abstract conceptual sense. We have the ability to, like our memories, we have recursion, we can think back and then go forward. And then we have, it's the decisions we make, like it's almost like we have multiple dimensions in our mind. But the AI doesn't have that same timing, the same timing we have, and that same ability. Not right now, but like I said, if we go quantum and then we apply that to AI, then it's gonna have a better thinking ability for sure, without a doubt. I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but that's when I would be like, okay, things are
Yeah.
getting a bit interesting.
Yeah, I think we're gonna see, in all of our lifetimes, we're really gonna see some really interesting stuff coming up soon here.
Right. So I do think that we are. They call this the the revolution, like the second industrial revolution. So I think that we
Right.
are definitely laying right now. Inventions are being made, especially when it comes to quantum, and I could tell we're just like back in a certain time they were laying the groundwork for um, the kind of infrastructure we have now. We will be laying the groundwork for a whole brand new system that works. Honestly, I would call this almost more like the plasma age or like the quantum age. We're at that level where we're getting closer to um, more like the lasers that we thought of in sci-fi and stuff like that. So
Right.
yeah,
Mhm.
gonna be different.
Yeah. I think my big concern is right now, AI, it seems like it's of limited intelligence, but eventually the servant will become the master as it becomes more and more intelligent. And we're using it as a tool. It could get to a point where it's so intelligent that we become the tools.
So right now it's the type of AI we have is just a tool. The more and more we feed it, the more and more it's like a giant like browser in a way. But
Right.
with just a more ability to think about the memory that it had last time.
Right.
But it doesn't have like a third element. So it has the two elements. It has like the memory and it has the ability to like kind of come out like, but it doesn't have sensory or instinct. And I feel like if AI starts to get an instinct, then that's when that's probably gonna be more of a third element that'll make it.
Or yeah,
And
instinct, or are we referring to more so intuition?
well, sometimes that's interchangeable, but I think on a lower level, um, I mean, it's going to be really hard because some people seem to think that animals aren't sentient, but they have instincts. But AI, whether it's sentient or not, it'll definitely have the ability to be self aware when it has instincts.
Right.
So, yeah, I know we're getting to the top of the hour. Did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts?
Um, well, I would say that have an overall idea of what you want to do, like going forward in your life. Like have a vision for yourself personally. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself. I think that sometimes, a lot of times, in careers, they tell you to invest in yourself, but they really want you to invest yourself in the company, which is
Right.
great. You should do that, but you should invest in the company for yourself. You should
Absolutely.
have a vision for yourself and what you want to be in the future. Um, and don't feel like you're not contributing anything, even if it's just an idea, because sometimes even ideas can push the world forward.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely thank you for coming on. And if you
Thank
ever
you.
want to come back, let us know. We'll bring you back.
Okay. All right. Have a good one,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks for coming on tonight. We really appreciated it.
Yes, it was a pleasure.
Definitely. And we like